is ancient wisdom that was lost over time, not because humanity failed, but because a certain kind of ignorance took its place. An ignorance that often feels profound, an ignorance that replaces direct knowing with belief, obedience, and authority. And in a strange way, this ignorance was necessary because it forced humanity to exhaust blind obedience and eventually step into something deeper, direct experiential knowing, gnosis. Ancient mystics spoke of a time when knowledge would be poured onto the earth, an earth desperate for it. They described it as a flood, not a flood meant to destroy, but one meant to transform. A flood meant to wash away an old system, a system that governed human consciousness for centuries, a system that severed humanity from its source, that kept us trapped in ignorance, blind obedience, and a lingering sense of emptiness we could never quite explain. That system took many forms. It appeared as materialism, as shallow interpretations of science, as rigid governments and hierarchies, as divisions between nations, races, beliefs, and ultimately as divisions within the individual. Because when the outer world is built on false assumptions, the inner world fractures, and that fracture creates a void. A void the system endlessly tries to fill through consumption, through pleasures, through constant stimulation, through dopamine driven scrolling, through endless wanting. But it's never enough because the age of Aquarius is not here to fill that void. It's here to reveal something way more unsettling and far more liberating. That the void is part of us, that it was never a defect, that we are never incomplete. What we call a void is not really a void, but an integral part of our being, a hole that does not need to be filled but accepted, just as we accept our bodies. And that this knowing must now be integrated into every structure we build within ourselves and within the world. Materialism is the dominant philosophy of the world as it is currently constructed. At its core, materialism is a metaphysical claim, the assertion that reality is fundamentally physical and that everything can be reduced to physical processes. Thoughts become brain activity, emotion become chemistry, consciousness becomes an accidental byproduct of matter. Even the human search for meaning is framed as nothing more than electrical firings in the brain. And at this point, a question naturally arises. Wasn't religion the dominant worldview just a few centuries ago? It was, but religion, as it came to be institutionalized, operated through the same materialistic structure, just in a different form. God was placed entirely outside the individual. Truth was externalized. Direct inner experience was removed, discouraged, or reserved for a select few. What remained was obedience, belief, and external compliance, not direct knowing. In that sense, modern scientific materialism was not a clean break from religious dogma, but an overreaction to it. When belief collapsed under its own weight, the pendulum swung fully in the opposite direction. God was declared an illusion, meaning was dismissed. Only the measurable was allowed to exist. Yet both system, institutionalized religion, and modern materialism share the same fundamental limitations. They deny the inner world as a primary source of truth. Rather than engaging consciousness directly, both attempt to fill the human interior with external structures, doctrines, systems, productivity, consumption, achievement. And this is why materialism leaves a void, not because it failed scientifically, but because a worldview that excludes inner experience can never account for the fullness of what it means to be human. So, how do we navigate this change? Not by resisting it, but by surrendering intelligently to it. Awakening did not arrive by accident. Those who have already encountered the collapse of old identities were not spared chaos, they were trained by it. What was revealed inwardly now becomes guidance outwardly. This does not mean transition will be easy. Awakening alone is not enough. Insight without embodiment collapses under pressure. That is why integration is now more important than revelation. Truth itself does not change, only our capacity to live in alignment with it does. When the world becomes chaotic, grounding becomes essential, not grounding in ideology or certainty, but in the direct knowing of shared consciousness. Teaching the body this truth through practices like meditation, yoga, and somatic awareness stabilizes the nervous system so we do not become reactive instruments of fear. Emotional regulation becomes a form of service. The ability to remain present without collapsing into outrage, despair, or hatred is no longer personal development. It is collective responsibility. Community matters here, not as an echo chamber, but as spaces where truth can be spoken even when it's uncomfortable. As this truth is embodied, empathy expands naturally. Non attachment replaces hostility. Even those perceived as enemies are not seen as threats, but as an expression of the same fractured fear moving through different forms. To be awakened in this time is not to escape the world, it is to remain coherent within it, not for personal elevation, but in service to truth itself, even when that service is inconvenient, especially when it is inconvenient. Just as the transition from organized religion to modern scientific materialism was not smooth, the transition we are now entering will be far more intense. This is not simply a shift in belief system, but a movement away from both materialism and institutional religion towards the reconciliation of the individual's path to truth. As the structures built on materialistic assumptions begin to destabilize economic system, nationalist identities, rigid hierarchies, even the very idea of money and external authority, humanity is forced into a deeper confrontation with existential questions. Who am I if I am not my job, my religion, my nationality, my role within a system? This is what awakening looks like, but on a global scale. Remember your own awakening, the confusion, the resistance, the fear. Now multiply that process by 8 billion people. layered with cultural histories, power dynamics, and competing identities, the desperate clinging to dissolving systems, and the fear of the unknown that follows. This is not an anomaly, it is the nature of transition. We can see this clearly in the way old structures resist their dissolution. As long standing hierarchies begin to crack, pushback intensifies, not because people are inherently evil, but because identity feels threatened. The same patterns appear in economic instability, cultural polarization, and extreme reactions to immigration and border identities. Protect what is ours becomes the instinctive response when the old map not longer works. For a moment, it appears as though the old systems are winning, but this illusion only exists when we fail to recognize the pattern. Modern materialism itself was an overreaction to religious dogma. In the same way, the current overcorrection will reach their limits and trigger the return of balance. This transition is not linear, it is oscillatory, a series of reactions to truth that eventually stabilizes through integration. Chaos is not the failure of process, it's the process unfolding within interconnected systems, the effects of a more complete understanding of reality. The effects of a more complete understanding of reality. The solution of systems is simple. We build systems that serve us, not the other way around. With a fuller understanding of reality, we are no longer bending to fit broken structures. We create frameworks that reflect who we truly are as individuals and as a collective. This is the essence of the age of Aquarius, designing systems that suit us, integrating the inner and the outer, and acting from clarity rather than compulsion. This is not about predicting the future, it is about building with accuracy from where we stand now. Thank you.